A clay tablet sits in the restricted study collection of the Vorderasiatisches Museum in Berlin, catalog number VAT 12846, and most visitors walk past it without a second glance. But this 4,400-year-old piece of baked clay contains a calculation that should not exist in any Bronze Age document. Not a myth, not a prayer, a tracking record. The Sumerians had been watching a planetary body for multiple orbital cycles before they wrote this tablet. They calculated its period, documented its observed properties, identified the next approach window, and embedded astronomical reference points in the tablet specifically so that future readers could calculate when that window would open. The window, when calculated against modern astronomical data, opened in the late 20th century, and it has not yet closed. In 2016, astronomers at Caltech announced evidence for a massive unobserved planet in the outer solar system. They called it Planet 9, and they have not found it yet. The Sumerians found it 4,400 years ago, and they left a warning about what happens when it gets close. Subscribe. I cover the documents that mainstream archaeology has decided not to discuss. Now let's go into what VAT-12846 actually says. The tablet was excavated from the temple library at Borsippa in 1902. Borsippa was a major Babylonian city, and its temple library held the most extensive astronomical archives of the ancient Near East. Documents covering observational records, predictive calculations, and what the Babylonian tradition called the deeper records, materials considered too sensitive for general circulation. VAT-12846 was catalogued among the deeper records, shipped to Berlin in 1903, and placed in the museum's restricted study collection. Not because it was unreadable, the cuneiform was clear, but because its content combined astronomical observation methodology with predictive framing involving a planetary body that mainstream scholars of the period did not recognize as a real astronomical object. The Sumerians had a complete list of known planets: Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, all 5 visible to the naked eye. And the body VAT-12846 describes was not among these 5. The early researchers concluded it must be mythological, filed it, restricted it, and moved on. In 1965, a German Assyriologist named Dr. Erika Reiner at the University of Chicago completed a working translation of VAT-12846 as part of a broader study of Babylonian astronomical literature, and her notes are preserved in the Berlin Museum archive. She wrote, "This tablet preserves a predictive calculation regarding a planetary body that the Sumerians tracked across long orbital periods. The astronomical reference points are specific enough to permit verification against modern celestial coordinates. The body described does not correspond to any of the planets known to modern astronomy through standard observational methods. The implications are significant. I have completed the translation, but am uncertain about appropriate venues for publication." Reiner did not publish her translation. She continued her distinguished career and produced major contributions to the field, but VAT-12846 was not among the texts she chose to publish. Her translation has been read by a small number of researchers in the 60 years since, and it has not appeared in any peer-reviewed publication. The tablet is in Berlin. The translation is in the archive, and the implications have not been engaged with by any institution responsible for the document. The structure of VAT-12846 is what needs to be understood first. The tablet is divided into 4 sections. The first section describes the planetary body itself, its observed properties, and the conditions under which it becomes visible. The second section explains the body's orbital pattern and the calculation method. The third section provides the astronomical reference points for the next approach window, and the fourth section describes what happens to Earth during the approach. The Sumerians called the body the visitor. The Sumerian term implies that the body is not permanently present in the inner solar system, and that its visits follow a predictable pattern.
The body has an elongated orbit. It travels far beyond the orbits of the known planets during most of its period, and returns to the inner solar system only at calculated intervals, becoming visible to naked eye observation only during the periods near its closest approach, when proximity to Earth and to the Sun produces sufficient illumination. Its observed properties, as the tablet describes them: larger than the inner planets, but smaller than the gas giants; reddish or brownish in apparent color; movement against the stellar background slower than the inner planets, but faster than the outer planets. And the body has satellites.
The Sumerians had no telescopes and could not have observed satellites of distant planetary bodies through ordinary visual observation. The description of satellites accompanying the body suggests either that the body becomes close enough to Earth during the approach phase that its satellites become detectable, or that the Sumerians had access to observational information through means that mainstream archaeology has not credited them with possessing. The tablet does not specify the source of the satellite information. It treats it as established knowledge. The second section of the tablet explains the orbital pattern. The Sumerians had calculated the body's orbital period through observation across multiple approach cycles, and the calculation produced a period of approximately 3,600 years, though the tablet specifies that the period varies slightly from cycle to cycle due to gravitational interactions with other bodies.
The orbit is described as highly elliptical. The closest approach brings the body into proximity with the inner planets, and the farthest distance takes it far beyond the outer planets. And the orbit's inclination relative to the plane of the inner planets is described as significant. The body crosses the plane only twice per orbit, at specific points. Those crossing points are critical. During most of the body's orbit, its gravitational influence on Earth is too small to produce measurable effects. But as it approaches the inner solar system, the influence becomes significant. And when it crosses the orbital plane of the inner planets, the influence reaches its maximum for that cycle. The Sumerians called this crossing event the alignment. They calculated precisely when the next alignment window would open, and the window, according to the calculation run against modern astronomical data, opened in the late 20th century and is currently in effect.
The conditions for the alignment are within their period of possibility, and the exact moment of crossing is not specified in the tablet, but the conditions that will indicate imminent crossing are, and those conditions can be checked against current observations. In 2016, astronomers Konstantin Batygin and Michael Brown at Caltech announced evidence for what they called Planet 9, a large planet in the outer solar system, approximately 10 times the mass of Earth, an orbital period of 10,000 to 20,000 years, a highly elliptical orbit, taking it far beyond Neptune. The planet has not been directly observed, despite extensive search efforts using the largest available telescopes. It was inferred from the orbital clustering of distant trans-Neptunian objects, Sedna 2012 VP113, and a series of smaller objects with extremely unusual orbits that cluster in ways suggesting the gravitational influence of an unseen body, something massive, something far out, pulling on them.
The orbital characteristics proposed for Planet 9 partially match the description on VAT 12846, with one difference. The Sumerian framework specifies a shorter orbital period, approximately 3,600 years, rather than 10,000 to 20,000, which suggests either that the bodies are different objects, or that the period calculations involve different assumptions, or that Planet 9 is not in the position astronomers are looking for it.
Because if the Sumerian framework is correct, the body is not in the deep outer solar system right now. It is approaching, moving through the region between the known outer planets and the inner solar system, moving toward the crossing point that the tablet calculates falls within the contemporary window. A body in that position would not produce the same gravitational signature as a body in the deep outer solar system. It would produce different anomalies, anomalies that standard search programs might not be optimized to detect.
The trans-Neptunian objects, whose clustering led to the Planet 9 hypothesis, continue to show patterns that mainstream astronomy has struggled to fully explain. The Sumerian framework provides an alternative explanation. The anomalies are not produced by a body parked in the deep outer solar system. They are produced by a body currently in transit, moving through the intermediate zone, approaching. Earth's magnetic field has been weakening at a rate that exceeds what standard geophysical models predicted. The magnetic poles have been moving more rapidly than historical patterns suggest, and the South Atlantic anomaly has been expanding and intensifying in ways that researchers have documented but not fully explained. Average global temperatures have been changing in patterns that exceed what standard climate models predict based on greenhouse gas concentrations alone. Seismic activity along major fault zones has shown increases that correlate across geographic regions in patterns that isolated local explanations struggle to account for. And volcanic events have occurred in regions typically inactive between historical periods of elevated activity. Each anomaly has conventional explanations: the magnetic field weakening attributed to natural geomagnetic variation, the climate changes to greenhouse gases and natural cycles, the seismic patterns to tectonic processes, and these explanations may be correct. But the Sumerian framework on VAT 12846 provides an alternative. The body described in the tablet, if it exists and is approaching as the framework predicts, would produce exactly these patterns during its approach phase. Gravitational perturbation of Earth's orbital characteristics produces climate effects. Effects on the liquid iron core produce magnetic field changes, and tidal stresses from increasing proximity produce seismic and volcanic responses. The cumulative pattern of anomalies across multiple Earth systems, taken together, fits the pattern of progressive gravitational influence from an approaching body rather than the pattern of isolated random variation. The fourth section of the tablet describes the effects on Earth during the alignment, and the Sumerians were specific. They were not predicting from theory. They were recording from observation, from previous cycles. The effects are gravitational primarily. The body's mass produces perturbations in Earth's orbit that change the planet's distance from the Sun, the eccentricity of its orbit, the orientation of its rotational axis, and the changes produce measurable effects on the planet's seasonal patterns and climate conditions across the alignment period. The Sumerians described 3 categories of effects they had documented from previous alignments: increased seismic activity along major fault lines, rapid changes in climate conditions across large geographic areas, and disruptions to ocean circulation patterns with cascading effects on biological systems. And one more: a change in the night sky. During the approach phase, the body becomes visible, not immediately, not all at once, first as an anomalous point of light that moves against the stellar background in the pattern the tablet describes, then as proximity increases as a visible disk. The Sumerians had observed this across multiple cycles and knew what the approach looked like. And they wrote, "When you see the visitor moving against the stars in the pattern we have described, the alignment is close. The effects we have documented will follow. Prepare for change rather than for catastrophe. The visitor will pass. Earth will continue. Your species, if it adapts, will continue with the planet." Not a prophecy of destruction, a warning about disruption, and an instruction to adapt.
The historical record contains evidence that the Sumerians were not describing something they imagined. The flood traditions preserved in Mesopotamian, Hebrew, Greek, Chinese, and indigenous American sources describe catastrophic events that correlate with what would be expected during alignments of a body with the orbital characteristics on VAT 12846. The Mesopotamian flood tradition, preserved in the Atrahasis epic and the Epic of Gilgamesh, describes a catastrophic event dated to approximately 2900 BCE, and the Sumerian framework calculates that date as an alignment window. The Black Sea deluge, dated through geological analysis to approximately 5600 BCE, falls within an alignment window in the framework, and the Younger Dryas climate disruption, which began approximately 12,900 years ago, falls within a period the framework would identify as a previous alignment.
Ice core records from Greenland and Antarctica preserve climate anomalies that show variability patterns matching the framework's predicted alignment intervals. Tree ring records from long-lived species preserve growth anomalies at periods that align with calculated alignment windows, and lake sediment cores from multiple regions preserve evidence of unusual flooding, drought, or temperature events at intervals that loosely match the framework's predictions. The convergence of independent geological and biological proxies on the same intervals is striking, even accounting for the dating uncertainties that affect any reconstruction of events from thousands of years ago. The body the tablet describes is not named in modern astronomical catalogs because it has not been directly observed by modern instruments, but its effects may have been recorded throughout human history as catastrophes that appeared to come from nowhere, and the next window is the current period.
The closing passage of the tablet, in Reiner's translation, addresses contemporary readers directly. The Sumerian scribes wrote, "Those who read this when the window we have calculated is approaching should know that we tracked the visitor through multiple of its cycles before we wrote this record. The body returns. The pattern is reliable. The conditions you observe during your reading should match what we have described. If our calculations are correct, the effects you experience during the alignment will not destroy your species. They will alter the conditions in which your species lives. Some regions will become less hospitable. Some regions will become more hospitable. The species that adapts to the altered conditions will continue. The species that fails to adapt will face difficulties."
We do not predict catastrophe. We predict change. Prepare for change rather than for catastrophe. The visitor will pass. Earth will continue. Your species, if it adapts, will continue with the planet. The Sumerians, preserving this document 4,400 years ago, anticipated that contemporary readers would face the approach window and would need guidance about what to expect. The guidance is practical. The alignment is not described as species ending, but as a transition that produces real effects on Earth's environment without producing catastrophic outcomes. The tablet sits in Berlin, catalog number VAT-12846, and the translation sits in the museum archive, unpublished, unreviewed, available to a small number of researchers who know to look for it. The astronomical reference points the tablet provides remain calculable against modern celestial data. The window the calculation produces remains open, and the body the framework describes has not been directly observed by modern instruments. But the gravitational anomalies that its approach would produce are present in contemporary observations of the outer solar system. The Sumerians did their part. They tracked the body through multiple cycles, preserved the description, calculated the next window, and left the guidance. The framework remains available for any researcher willing to take it seriously enough to investigate what it actually describes, whether the body is already detectable to instruments pointed in the right direction, whether the anomalies being observed in Earth's magnetic field, climate, and seismic patterns are the early signature of its approach,
whether the warnings the Sumerians left about disruption during the alignment period are relevant to the contemporary period. These are questions the framework allows, and the answers require looking, but the looking has not been done.
The tablet is in Berlin. You can request access. It is catalogued. It is technically accessible to researchers. It has never been displayed in a public exhibition and has never been the subject of a peer-reviewed paper. The body it describes may be detectable right now to instruments pointed in the direction the tablet's framework would indicate. The magnetic field weakening has been measured. The trans-Neptunian orbital clustering has been documented, and the climate anomalies that exceed model predictions have been recorded. The Sumerians tracked the visitor through multiple cycles and preserved the calculations specifically so that the people living during the next window would have the framework. We are the people living during the next window.
The visitor, if the framework is correct, is approaching. And what comes next will not be announced by any institution. It will appear first as anomalies, then as the point of light moving against the stars in the pattern the tablet describes, then as something that cannot be explained away. The Sumerians knew this would happen. They wrote it down. They left it in the archive. Subscribe, because next week I am covering the Sumerian tablet that describes the specific regions of Earth that were most affected during the previous alignment 3,600 years ago, and why those regions are the same ones showing the most unusual anomalies right now. The video is on screen. Click it. I'll see you in the next one.